When Rich Karen looked Judge Judy in the eye and said, "You're nothing," the entire courtroom stopped breathing. She leaned back in her designer suit, diamonds flashing, acting like she owned the room. But she didn't know. In just 20 seconds, Judge Judy would quietly, calmly, and surgically tear her entire world apart. Her lies, her threats, her arrogance, everything she built collapsed in front of cameras. And just when Karen thought it couldn't get worse, Judge Judy opened one envelope that exposed a truth no one was ready for. But before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from? Don't forget the subscribe button. The camera would catch everything: the smirk, the posture, the deliberate tilt of Karen's chin. She lounged back in the witness chair like someone sunbathing on a private yacht, her diamond bracelet flashing under the overhead lights with every flick of her wrist. The gesture was not accidental. Nothing about her was accidental. Not the designer suit, not the perfect hair, not the heavy perfume still drifting faintly across the room. Across from her, the plaintiff stood stiff and small, fingers curled around the worn edges of a faded folder that looked like it had survived years of pleading. She was the kind of woman who carried her whole life in documents, not because she trusted paper, but because she had learned people rarely listened otherwise. Judge Judy settled back in her chair, the leather barely whispering under her movement. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in calculation, the quiet kind that made defendants regret their confidence. Karen stretched her legs just slightly, crossing them with a soft click of her expensive heels. "I mean, honestly," she said, loud enough for the cameras and spectators, "I thought this show would be tougher. I did not expect to be judged by someone so—" Judy raised one hand. That was all. A tiny, precise motion. The room froze again. Ms. Clark," she said, her voice smooth and impossibly calm, "you will choose your next words with care." Karen offered a slow smile. "I always do." But even as she said it, something flickered behind her eyes, a tiny tremor of awareness, as if a small corner of her mind was quietly warning her she had pushed too far. Judy shifted her attention to the plaintiff. "Ms. Nolan, you may begin." The plaintiff stepped forward. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice carried the weight of someone who had been waiting far too long to be heard. She took the easement access from me without notice," Ms. Nolan said. "Locked the gate, blocked my driveway, and told me to find a different life path. That's what she said." "We had an agreement," Karen snapped, leaning forward now. "An agreement she failed to maintain. I improved that land. I invested in it. I have every right to protect my investment." "By blocking her in?" Judy asked, one eyebrow lifting. Karen shrugged. "By setting standards. Some people need boundaries." A murmur rippled through the audience, the subtle kind that sounds like a shared exhale of disbelief. Judy glanced down at her notes, then back up, eyes sharp. "Ms. Clark, do you have documentation of this agreement you're referring to?" Karen laughed, quick, sharp, almost musical. "Documentation? Please, I do not need—" Judy lowered her glasses, just slightly. "You do not need— what exactly?" Karen blinked at her, the first crack forming at the edge of her perfectly painted composure. Judy set her pen down with deliberate care, her gaze pinned to Karen's defiant smile. "Let me ask you one simple question, Ms. Clark," she said. And Karen laughed again, a sound that would not survive the next section. The laughter did not echo this time. It fell flat, like a glass dropped onto carpet. A few heads turned, not toward Judge Judy, but toward Karen, as if they were finally seeing something she had tried desperately to hide. Confidence was not the same as control, and the room was starting to smell the difference. Judge Judy did not raise her voice. She did not shift in her seat. She simply waited. Karen's smile flickered, confused by the silence. She looked around, expecting the audience to mirror her amusement, but their faces held something closer to discomfort than support. The bailiff watched her with careful eyes, the way someone watches a candle leaning too close to a curtain. Judy finally spoke, her tone still calm. "Ms. Clark, I will ask again. Do you have documentation of the agreement you claim existed between you and Ms. Nolan?" Karen folded her arms, her diamond bracelet clinking against itself like a warning chime. "I told you, I do not need paperwork to prove what is obvious. I made the property better. She benefited from my improvements. That is the agreement." That is not an agreement, Judy said sharply. That is an opinion. A small gasp came from somewhere in the audience. Karen straightened. Well, my opinion happens to matter. Judy tilted her head, eyes narrowing with surgical precision. Not here it doesn't. Something in the air shifted, subtle but undeniable. The camera would catch it, Karen's posture tightening, her jaw clenching so slightly it could be missed if not for the way the light traced along the edge of her face. The bravado that once filled the room now sat unevenly on her shoulders. Judy turned toward the plaintiff. Ms. Nolan, you brought evidence. Please step forward. The plaintiff nodded, moving carefully, as if afraid any sudden motion might shatter the fragile calm around her. She placed her worn folder on the podium, its frayed edges whispering of late nights spent gathering proof she hoped someone would finally believe. Karen scoffed. Oh, come on, that's not evidence. That's a scrapbook. The plaintiff didn't even look at her. These are receipts, she said quietly, and photos, and every communication we had. She told me I did not need access to my own property. She said, people like you should learn their place. Judy's gaze snapped to Karen. You said that? Karen lifted her chin. I stand by it? The audience exhaled all at once, a unified reaction to a truth so casually cruel it left a mark in the air. Judy's voice dropped lower, colder. Ms. Clark, arrogance is not confidence. Do not confuse the two. Karen swallowed, barely noticeable but visible enough to ripple tension across the courtroom. Her confidence wasn't gone, but its edges were fraying. Ms. Nolan, Judy said, show me what you brought. The plaintiff opened the folder, revealing a stack of documents, each one neat, dated, painfully organized. Karen's eyes darted to the papers with a flicker of something. Worry, maybe, or the recognition of a threat she hadn't planned for. And then the plaintiff mentioned it, almost inadvertently. There's just one thing missing, she whispered, the document she tore up. Karen's head snapped toward her so fast the tension cracked like a whip. Judy leaned forward, her eyes sharp as glass. What document are we talking about, Ms. Nolan? Karen's smile vanished, not slowly, but as if ripped clean off her face. The question hovered in the air, sharp enough to cut through whatever was left of Karen's composure. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to dim, as if the room itself leaned closer to hear the answer. And in the space between their breaths, the truth began to rise. Ms. Nolan hesitated before opening the worn folder fully, the papers inside rustling like soft confessions. Her hands trembled, but her voice found a steadiness she had not shown before, the steady tone of someone who had been silenced too many times and finally had a chance to speak. She pulled out a stack of printed photos, their edges bent with use. Your Honor, she said quietly, the document I mentioned was the access agreement from when I first bought my home. She tore it up in front of me. She said she owned the land now, and I should be grateful she even let me stay. Karen let out an incredulous laugh, too loud, too brittle. This is absurd. Why would I tear up a document? What would that even accomplish? Judge Judy glanced at her, unimpressed. That is the question, Ms. Clark, and I suspect the answer won't help you. Karen scoffed, flipping her hair with practiced defiance. But her eyes kept drifting to the folder, to the stack of evidence she couldn't quite predict. The camera would catch the way her nails tapped the table, a quiet, uneven rhythm. Tap, 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 the sound of a facade beginning to slip. Ms. Nolan pulled out a photo. The gate chained shut, the access road blocked by Karen's luxury SUV. It wasn't just the gate, she said softly. It was the threats. She said if I complained, she'd make sure I regretted it. She told me she had people in the city, people in courts, that nobody would believe someone like me. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. Someone like you? She repeated. The plaintiff nodded. She called me background noise. The murmurs in the courtroom deepened, a low ripple of disbelief and anger. Karen shifted in her seat, rolling her eyes. Oh, please, she is exaggerating. People exaggerate to look innocent. You're doing a wonderful job proving otherwise, Judy replied coolly. Karen opened her mouth to protest, but Judy raised her hand, stopping her cold. Ms. Nolan, Judy said, what exactly was on the document you claim Ms. Clark destroyed? The plaintiff swallowed. It was the original easement agreement. It showed that I had permanent access to the shared drive, signed, recorded, legal. Judy's expression hardened, the lines around her eyes carved deeper by years of seeing this exact type of arrogance. "And Ms. Clark," she said, turning back, "you are denying this document's existence?" Karen lifted her chin. "Absolutely. There is no such document. She's making it up to look like a victim." The plaintiff's hands tightened around the folder, knuckles whitening. "I saw her tear it up," she whispered, "right in front of me. She said, 'Good luck proving anything now.'" For a moment, the entire courtroom fell into a silence so complete it seemed to hum. Judge Judy leaned back slowly, studying Karen the way a surgeon studies an X-ray, looking for the fracture. "Yeah, interesting," Judy said, her voice like low steel. "Because if that document truly does not exist—" She paused, eyes narrowing. "Then why did the court receive something this morning labeled easement agreement? Copy." The moment Judge Judy said the words, easement agreement, copy, the air changed. It was not a reaction, it was a recoil, as if the room itself stepped back from the truth rising in front of them. And for the first time, Karen's confidence did not fill the silence. Karen blinked, once, then twice, small. Rapid flashes of disbelief that slipped through the cracks of her polished exterior. Her bracelet glinted as she shifted in her seat, suddenly less like a queen, and more like someone waiting for a verdict she did not prepare for. Copy?" she repeated, the word landing unsteady on her tongue. Judge Judy nodded slowly. "Delivered anonymously. Arrived in the clerk's office before this hearing even began." A soft ripple moved through the courtroom, the kind of tension that comes when people realize the story they thought they understood is about to open a hidden door. Karen sat up straighter. "Anonymous? Then it's not legitimate. Anyone could fake something like that." "Possibly," Judy said, calm as a tightening wire, "but the timing is interesting, don't you think?" Karen tried to laugh, but it came out thinner than paper. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. She's clearly manipulating." "Ms. Clark," Judy's voice cut clean through the room, "no one is manipulating anything except perhaps the person who insists a legal document never existed." The plaintiff stood quietly, the folder held against her chest like a lifeline. Her eyes were fixed on Karen, but not with anger, with something closer to tiredness, a long, worn exhaustion that only truth could end. "Ms. Nolan," Judy continued, "did you know about this copy?" "No," the plaintiff said gently. "I thought it was gone forever. I did not think anyone would help me." Karen scoffed. "Help her? Please. She's hardly someone people rush to help." The way she said it, sharp, dismissive, dripping with superiority, made even the bailiff shift uncomfortably. Judy leaned forward. "Ms. Clark, your attitude is becoming increasingly revealing." Karen crossed her legs again, but this time the movement lacked grace. Her heel scraped against the tile, a small but telling slip. "I want to see this supposed document," she demanded. Judy held her gaze, unflinching. "You will, but first, answer something for me." Karen's lips parted, ready to object, but Judy didn't let her. "If you believed no such document existed," Judy said, voice steady, "why did you react when Ms. Nolan mentioned you tearing something up?" Karen froze, a full stop in motion, even her breath stilled. "I reacted because it was a lie," she said finally, forcing the words out like brittle glass. "Did you tear up anything?" Judy asked. "No," Karen snapped. "Of course I did not." Ms. Nolan's head lowered, not in defeat but in a quiet, painful memory resurfacing. "I watched her," she whispered. "She tore it into pieces and threw them in her fire pit." Karen's jaw tightened. "She is delusional." Judy didn't respond. She didn't have to. Her silence was a mirror, and Karen could not look into it without seeing herself clearly. The courtroom lights hummed softly as Judy signaled to the clerk. "Bring me the envelope," she said. A rustle moved through the rows as the clerk rose, carrying a large sealed envelope with practiced caution. Karen's eyes followed it, wide and unsteady, like a person watching a fuse burn toward a hidden charge. The clerk set the mysterious envelope on Judy's bench with a heavy, echoing tap. Judy's hand hovered over it, not opening it, not yet. "Ms. Clark," she said softly, "before I break this seal, is there anything you'd like to admit?" For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Karen's silence, once impossible, now spread through the room like a slow, creeping shadow, and when Judge Judy finally broke the seal, the sound was louder than any gavel strike. The envelope opened with a soft rip, delicate, deliberate, almost ceremonial. It felt like the entire courtroom leaned in as Judy slid out a single folded document, its edges crisp, its weight unsettling. Karen's breath caught. She tried to hide it, but the camera would capture everything. The tightening jaw, the stiffened shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the arm of the chair until her knuckles whitened. Judy did not rush. She unfolded the document slowly, one careful layer at a time, like peeling back a disguise that had been worn for too long. Ms. Nolan held her folder close, as if bracing herself for whatever truth waited inside the paper. The air grew heavy, thick with anticipation, fear, and the quiet hope that maybe justice had finally arrived. Karen forced a scoff. "This is ridiculous. It is obviously fake. Anyone could have—" "Ms. Clark," Judy said without looking up, "be quiet." The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They landed like a verdict before the verdict. Judy's eyes scanned the document, her expression unreadable, the kind of calm that made defendants tremble. She traced her finger beneath a line, then paused at the bottom. Her voice came out steady, sharp enough to slice through any remaining doubt. "Ms. Clark," she said, "is this your signature?" Karen's mouth opened, then closed. Color drained from her face, leaving only a fragile mask of panic covered by a thin coat of defiance. "I cannot tell from here," she stammered. "Then come closer," Judy replied, lifting the document between two fingers. Karen shifted in her seat but did not rise. Judy's eyes narrowed. "Ms. Clark, approach." That was when the first real crack appeared, not in her voice, but in her movement. Her legs hesitated, her confidence faltered, and her diamond bracelet slid down her wrist in a small, trembling clink. She walked forward, not with the swagger she entered with, but with the uneven steps of someone walking toward something they hoped wasn't real. When she reached the bench, Judy angled the document toward her. The courtroom watched her face, watched the moment her eyes landed on the signature. A twitch. A flinch. The truth flickered across her expression faster than she could bury it. "That looks similar," she whispered. "Similar?" Judy repeated. "Ms. Clark, it is identical to your signature on your property purchase agreement." Karen swallowed hard. "I never signed an easement agreement. She is lying." Ms. Nolan did not move, but her voice lifted gently from the plaintiff's podium. "Your Honor, that is the agreement she tore up, word for word." The bailiff stepped slightly closer, not as threat, but as witness. Judy lowered the document, letting the weight of it settle between them. "Ms. Clark," she said, "this copy contradicts everything you've testified today." Karen's lips parted, searching desperately for a lie that could still work, but nothing came. Her silence said more than her words ever had. "Forgery," Karen whispered suddenly, clinging to the only defense left. Judy leaned back, eyes cold and precise. "Then I assume you will have no issue handing over your phone for verification." The word phone hit the room like a dropped match. Karen froze, not dramatically, but in the small, instinctive way someone freezes when they hear a door lock behind them. Judge Judy waited, hands folded, eyes steady, giving Karen just enough silence to feel the heat rise. Karen's fingers twitched toward the expensive purse resting at her feet, then curled away as if the leather had suddenly turned hot. Her eyes darted from Judy to the bailiff, then to the cameras she once relished performing for. Now they felt like spotlights aimed straight at the fractures in her story. My phone?" she echoed, forcing a laugh that cracked midway through. "You cannot just demand my personal property." "I can," Judy cut in, "and I am." Karen blinked rapidly, like someone trying to clear a smoke-filled room with their eyelashes. "This is outrageous," she said, her voice climbing. "You are violating my privacy." Judy held her gaze steady. "Ms. Clark, you claimed this document was forged. If that is true, then your phone, which you used to communicate with Ms. Nolan, will help prove it." The plaintiff stood still, clutching her weathered folder to her chest. She did not gloat. She did not smirk. She simply watched Karen with a quiet heaviness, the kind that grew from nights spent wondering if anyone would ever believe her. Karen shook her head, fiery strands of hair shifting out of place. No, absolutely not. I will not hand over my phone. I have personal photos, business documents, and likely, Judy said softly, messages that contradict every lie you've told today. The audience reacted, a low, rippling murmur that felt like a rising tide. Even the bailiff exhaled slowly, the way someone does when they know a truth is about to surface, whether anyone wants it to or not. Karen's eyes widened, the panic now visible beneath her fading veneer of control. You cannot talk to me like that, she snapped. I am a respected businesswoman. Respect, Judy said, her voice a quiet blade, is earned, not purchased. The line hung in the air like dust caught in a beam of light. Karen faltered, her mouth hanging open as if searching for a comeback that no longer existed. Ms. Nolan finally spoke, her voice soft but unwavering. You threatened me on that phone, Ms. Clark. You told me you would make my life small. You said you would bury me in paperwork until I disappeared. Karen spun around. That never happened. Judy raised one eyebrow, the kind of slight movement that carried more weight than shouting ever could. Ms. Clark, she said, bring me your phone. Karen's breathing quickened. She looked down, then up, then anywhere except toward the bench. Her voice dropped to a shaky whisper. I do not have it with me. The bailiff stepped forward. Ma'am, it was visible in your purse when you walked in. The courtroom went very still. Karen whipped around, eyes wide, caught in a lie too small to fix and too big to hide. Judy tapped her pen lightly, the sound both warning and countdown. Ms. Clark, she said, your phone, now. Karen's hand moved toward her purse, slowly, reluctantly, as if lifting a weight she knew would crush her. Her fingers brushed the phone, then stopped. Judy noticed, and her eyes sharpened. Ms. Clark, she said softly, why do you look terrified of what I'm about to find? Karen's fingertips hovered above the phone like it was a burning coal. The cameras zoomed in, catching the hesitation, the fear, the sudden stillness in her posture. Judge Judy did not speak. She simply waited, letting silence sandpaper the truth out of the air. When Karen finally grabbed the phone, her grip was too tight, knuckles pale against the rose-gold case. She held it close to her chest as if shielding a wounded secret. The courtroom watched her shrink behind it, her earlier bravado collapsing into quiet, frantic calculation. Hand it to the bailiff, Judy instructed calmly. Karen didn't move. The bailiff, tall and steady, approached with slow, practiced steps. His shadow loomed across her like a long, dark reminder that truth always has weight. When he held out his hand, Karen's shoulders tensed. I have rights, she whispered. And you will keep them, Judy replied, her tone even. But rights do not protect lies. Karen squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, one small, desperate pause, then handed over the phone. The instant it left her fingers, the entire room seemed to inhale. The bailiff carried it to Judy, who remained expressionless as she unlocked the screen with Karen's reluctantly provided passcode. The faint click of the phone unlocking felt like a vault opening. Judy's eyes moved across the screen, measured, unhurried. Then they narrowed. Karen leaned forward, breath quickening. What are you looking at? Judy ignored her. She swiped again and again. A soft gasp rose from the audience as Judy tilted the phone toward herself, the glow illuminating her glasses with a cold blue light. Photos, Judy said quietly. A great many photos. Karen's voice cracked. That does not mean anything. Ms. Nolan stood completely still, her hands clasped in front of her. She did not blink as Judy spoke. These photos, Judy continued, appear to show the access road, the gate, and... She paused, tapping the screen. A torn piece of paper with your signature, Ms. Clark. Karen surged forward. That is not... Those are not... You do not understand. The bailiff stepped subtly closer to her, ready if needed. She didn't notice. Judy swiped to another image, her brow lifted. And here, she said, a screenshot of a message you sent to Ms. Nolan 2 weeks ago. Karen's breath hitched. She shook her head violently. No, that's out of context. Judy read aloud. Do not push me. I will take everything from you if you keep whining. A collective exhale swept across the courtroom like a slow wave. Karen's voice broke. She provoked me. She was making threats. She was asking for access to her property, Judy replied, her tone turning colder. And you responded with intimidation. The plaintiff's eyes glistened, but she kept her composure, a quiet strength rising where fear once lived. Karen tried again, voice trembling. Those photos could be edited. Judy tapped the phone. These are time-stamped, metadata intact, GPS location included. Karen's lips parted, then closed, then parted again, a person drowning under the weight of her own lies. The room felt smaller now, the light harsher, the silence accusatory. Ms. Clark, Judy said, there's one more album on this device. Karen's head whipped up. What album? Judy's voice dropped to a tone that made the room lean in. The one you tried to hide. Judy turned the phone outward, just slightly, enough for Karen's face to drain of color. There is something else you photographed, she said softly, something that changes everything. Karen's face drained so quickly it was as if someone had pulled the color straight out of her. Whatever sat inside that hidden album was not just incriminating, it was something she never expected anyone else to see. And Judge Judy's silence made the moment burn. Judy held the phone like evidence pulled from a fire, careful, precise, aware of its weight. The screen glowed faintly against her palm as she tapped the hidden album again, making sure there was no mistake. Karen swallowed, the sound audible in the dead-still courtroom. Your Honor, those photos, those are personal. Everything on here appears personal, Judy replied, her tone cool. Especially the images involving the plaintiff's property. The plaintiff lifted her head, her voice gentle but steady. What images? Judy turned to her. Photos of the access road, long before Ms. Clark blocked it. Photos of the easement document, intact. Photos of Ms. Clark marking off your property line with tape. Karen shook her head rapidly. I was documenting improvements. It was for insurance, for my accountant. Then why? Judy asked, eyes narrowing. Are there images of the torn document in your fire pit? The courtroom gasped, a collective sound that seemed to rattle the air. Karen's breathing quickened. Her earlier arrogance had evaporated, replaced by a jittery defensiveness that only deepened the suspicion filling the room. I took pictures because she accused me of tearing something, Karen blurted. I was proving her wrong. Judy stared at her, unimpressed. Ms. Clark, the metadata shows these photos were taken the same afternoon Ms. Nolan claims you destroyed the document. Karen's composure shattered one piece at a time. That is coincidence. You do not know. I know exactly what I'm looking at, Judy cut in, and I want to know why you said the document did not exist when you photographed it. The plaintiff's eyes filled with a quiet ache. She wasn't smug. She wasn't triumphant. She was simply watching a truth she had carried alone finally step into daylight. Karen pressed both hands to her forehead. You do not understand the pressure I am under. I have a reputation. I have investors. People rely on me. If anything looks messy, Judy repeated sharply. You blocked this woman's driveway, destroyed legal paperwork, lied in court, and threatened her through text. That is not messy, Ms. Clark. That is misconduct. Karen's lips trembled. I was protecting what is mine. By taking what is hers, Judy countered. Karen's gaze darted toward the plaintiff, a flash of guilt or perhaps recognition slipping through her defenses. Her property affects the value of mine, she whispered. I could not let it jeopardize. So you decided her rights did not matter? Judy said. Karen hugged her arms tightly across her chest, eyes darting toward the bench. The room no longer saw a confident businesswoman. They saw someone unraveling under the weight of her own choices. Judy locked the phone and set it down with quiet finality. Ms. Clark, she said, I need one more piece of information. Karen looked up, her voice trembling. What else could you possibly want? Judy leaned forward slightly, her stare piercing. I want your financial record tied to this property, all transactions, all improvements, all payments. Karen's breath hitched. No, she said instantly, too fast, too sharp. The audience stiffened, Judy noticed. Interesting, Judy murmured. Very interesting. She signaled to the clerk. Bring in the voicemail, Ms. Clark left for the plaintiff, the one she forgot she recorded. The moment Judy mentioned a voicemail, something inside Karen snapped. Not loudly, but visibly, like a hairline crack racing across glass. She tried to hide it, but the room saw everything. The clerk stepped forward, holding a small speaker connected to the court's audio system. The device looked harmless, a simple black box, but the way Karen stared at it made it feel like a weapon pointed straight at her. "Your Honor," she said, voice trembling, "that recording is irrelevant. It was taken out of context. It was emotional. It is not—" "Ms. Clark," Judy interrupted, "sit down." Karen froze mid-breath. Her body obeyed before her pride could catch up. The clerk pressed play. A hiss of static filled the room, followed by a harsh inhale, Karen's inhale, sharp and unmistakable. Then her voice spilled into the courtroom, amplified, raw, and unfiltered. "If you bring this up again, I swear I will make your life small. I will bury you in paperwork until you cannot breathe. Do not test me. You think people will listen to you? I will make sure they don't." Ms. Nolan flinched, not from fear, but from the memory of helplessness resurfacing in high-definition sound. The room went silent. Not the stunned kind, the sickened kind. Karen lurched forward. That was... She provoked me. She threatened me first. I was defending myself. Judy looked at her with a calm that felt heavier than anger. "Ms. Clark, you said earlier this message did not exist." Karen's mouth opened and closed like someone trying to breathe underwater. "You lied," Judy continued, boldly. "Repeatedly." "It was one time," Karen blurted. "Everyone gets angry. You cannot judge me for—" "Ms. Clark," Judy said sharply, "this is a courtroom. I literally judge you." The audience reacted with a subtle wave of tension, the kind that says everyone feels the shift. The power flipping, the lies collapsing, the truth rising in the space Karen could no longer fill with bravado. Karen shook her head, tears forming, mascara threatening to run. "You do not understand the pressure I'm under. The property, the investors. I had to protect myself. I had to keep everything together." "And so you destroyed a legal document?" Judy asked. "Threatened this woman? Lied under oath?" Karen's breath hitched as she realized what she had admitted without meaning to. Her hands covered her mouth, as if she could pull the words back in. "Ms." Nolan stepped forward, her voice soft. "I never wanted trouble. I just wanted my driveway." Karen looked at her, eyes filled with a kind of panic that had nothing to do with the case, and everything to do with the crumbling image she clung to. Judy leaned back, her voice cold and direct. "You hid behind wealth, Ms. Clark, behind intimidation, behind lies, but your own voice has revealed the truth." Karen's shoulders slumped, the collapse no longer theoretical, but happening in real time. For the first time, she had nothing left to argue, nothing left to hide behind, nothing left to weaponize. Only herself. Karen whispered, voice breaking. "That is not the whole story." Judy tilted her head. "Then by all means, tell us." But Karen's silence said she wasn't ready for the truth she'd been avoiding. "Do you think remorse should ever erase guilt? Or does justice demand consequence no matter what?" Karen's silence didn't feel like defiance anymore. It felt like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, wind tearing at the lies she'd wrapped around herself. When she finally looked up, the mask she'd clung to so tightly was already starting to crumble. The courtroom could see it, Judge Judy could see it, and Karen knew it. Karen lifted her shaking hands to her face, wiping mascara from under her eyes, as if removing the smudges might help rebuild the persona slipping through her fingers. But the smirk, the fire, the superiority, all of it was dimming. Judy watched her with a steady gaze, not triumphant, not cruel, but unflinchingly present. "Ms. Clark," she said softly, "you claimed the plaintiff provoked you. What exactly did she do?" Karen looked toward Ms. Nolan, the quiet woman she once dismissed as background noise. Now she couldn't even meet her eyes. She kept calling about the gate," Karen whispered, "texting, emailing. It was constant." "Because," Ms. Nolan added gently, "I was trapped." Karen flinched at the word, trapped. Judy leaned forward. "So instead of fixing the problem, you threatened her." Karen's breath escaped in ragged fragments. "You don't understand. My life, everything was falling apart at the time. The investors were pushing me. The property needed repairs. My mother—" She stopped, swallowing hard. My mother had just died. A quiet tremor rippled through her posture, so subtle the cameras almost missed it. Judy's voice lowered, not softer, but deeper. Loss does not justify cruelty. Karen nodded slowly. A fragile motion. I know. Her voice cracked. But I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was trying to hold everything together. Judy's eyes didn't soften, but they grew more focused, as if she was seeing Karen with a different kind of clarity. People who are falling apart often grab the wrong things to steady themselves, she said. But you didn't just grab. You took. Karen's chin trembled as she tried to push words through her unraveling composure. I didn't mean to ruin her life. I just thought she wouldn't fight back. Ms. Nolan exhaled softly, not in victory, but in the ache of knowing someone had underestimated her humanity. It wasn't a fight, she murmured. I just wanted my home back. The tension in the room shifted, no longer just anger aimed at Karen, but a heavy, undeniable empathy hanging around them like thick air. Karen wiped her face again, smearing the remnants of her confidence across the back of her hand. The cameras captured her vulnerability, raw, trembling, unavoidable. Tell me something, Judy said. When you saw her folder, the one she brought in today, what did you feel? Karen hesitated. Then, almost inaudibly, fear. Judy nodded. Fear of what? Karen's voice shook. Fear that someone finally had proof. The room went still, the kind of stillness that feels like truth settling into its rightful place. Ms. Clark, Judy said, there's one question I need answered before I move forward. Karen looked up, eyes wide and red-rimmed. Why, Judy asked, were you so desperate to make her disappear from that driveway? And from this story? Karen inhaled sharply, as if the question struck a nerve she'd spent years burying. Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet. Judy leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you still not telling me, Ms. Clark? Karen's eyes filled, not with defiance, but with something darker. And in that silence, everyone felt the truth clawing its way to the surface. Karen's eyes glistened, not from courtroom pressure, but from something deeper, older, and far more fragile. Every wall she'd built, with money, with arrogance, with threats, now quivered like thin glass under a rising storm. Judge Judy saw it, and she wasn't looking away. Judy let the silence widen, giving Karen space she wasn't sure she wanted. The cameras framed her face in tight close-up, catching the tremble in her jaw. The way her fingers twisted anxiously in her lap, the quiet unraveling happening behind her eyes. Ms. Clark, Judy said, voice steady but no longer sharp, what are you hiding? Karen opened her mouth, but no words came. Instead, her breath stuttered, fragile and uneven. The Karen who swaggered into the courtroom, the one with diamonds, with confidence, with cold certainty, was gone. In her place sat someone unarmored, someone hurting. She whispered, staring down at the polished table. I wasn't trying to destroy her. I was trying to protect something. Ms. Nolan watched her, not with anger, but with a soft confusion, as if trying to see the human shape beneath the cruelty she'd endured. Judy leaned back, studying Karen in that way she reserved for moments when the truth was close, but not yet spoken. Protect what? Judy asked. Karen swallowed hard. Her throat bobbed visibly, fighting against words she'd never intended to say aloud. My mother, she whispered. The courtroom shifted, not physically, but emotionally, as though the air itself tilted toward her confession. She bought that property, Karen continued, voice trembling, years ago. She said it was her dream investment, a legacy she'd leave behind. But she was sick. She didn't have time to finish what she started. Her hands trembled as they twisted together, nails digging into the skin. When she was dying, Karen said, her voice cracking, I promised her the land would be worth something, that I would make it valuable, that I wouldn't let anyone diminish it. Ms. Nolan's face softened with a brief flicker of understanding, a small ache of empathy. But the easement, Judy said quietly, diminished the value? Karen nodded, tears now spilling freely. The access road cut across the best part of the land. When I inherited it, the appraiser said the easement made it commercially compromised. My mother never knew. She'd already passed. She covered her mouth, a sob catching in her throat. I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't admit she'd made a mistake. I had to fix it. I had to make her proud. Her voice dropped to a broken whisper. So when I found the easement agreement, I tore it up. I thought if no one saw it, it wouldn't ruin everything. Ms. Nolan's breath hitched, not in anger, but in the stunned realization that the cruelty done to her was born from a grief she never knew existed. Judy's expression remained composed, but a faint shift occurred in her eyes, a recognition of pain, even inside wrongdoing. But hiding a burden doesn't make it lighter, Judy said. It makes it destructive. Karen nodded, tears falling onto the wood grain of the table. I know. I just didn't know how to stop. I didn't know how to let the truth out without disappointing her memory. And so, Judy said slowly, you punished someone else instead of facing your own grief. Karen's shoulders caved inward, the collapse no longer emotional alone but physical, as though the truth itself had weight. Judy leaned forward, voice softer than it had been all day. Ms. Clark, what exactly were you lying to your mother about? Karen inhaled sharply, and the room felt the ground shift just before the twist breaks open. The question struck Karen like a physical blow, her entire body recoiling, breath hitching as if she'd been yanked backward into a memory she'd spent years burying. For a moment, she wasn't in the courtroom. She was somewhere else, somewhere darker, smaller, and far more painful. Karen clutched the sides of the witness stand, her fingers digging into the wood as though it were the only solid thing left in her unraveling world. Her throat worked in tight, painful swallows as she tried to force out words that had calcified inside her. She whispered, the sound barely audible. Judge Judy waited, not pressing, not pushing, simply holding the space with a stillness so intentional it felt like a hand extended across a chasm. Ms. Nolan watched quietly, her posture softened. Shifting from defensive to something gentler, curiosity threaded with the human instinct to understand pain, even when it came wrapped in cruelty. Karen finally found her voice, though it trembled with every syllable. My mother, she said, believed the land was our future. She thought it would lift us into a different life. She'd always wanted to leave something behind that showed she mattered. A tear slipped down her cheek, and Karen didn't bother to wipe it away. When she was dying, I told her it was worth more than it was. A lot more. She sniffed, the breath shaky. I told her I'd already lined up buyers, that people were fighting over it, that she had created something incredible. Judy's expression remained steady, but her voice softened. Why lie? Karen's shoulders collapsed. Because she was proud of me. For the first time in years. And I couldn't let that fade. She covered her mouth to smother a sob that escaped anyway. Raw, unfiltered, the kind that exposed the truth beneath every terrible choice she'd made. So when she asked about the easement, Karen continued, I told her it wasn't real. I told her there were no restrictions. I told her everything was perfect. The lights above flickered faintly, as though reacting to the weight of the confession. But after she died, Karen said, voice splintering, I found the easement agreement, the original, her signature right next to the seller's. She had known, she'd read it. She just didn't understand the financial impact. She shook her head, tears streaming freely. And I panicked. I thought the only way to keep my promise was to erase the problem, to erase the proof. Ms. Hayes. Nolan exhaled, a soft, sympathetic sound she hadn't expected from herself. Karen turned toward her, face blotched and streaked with mascara. I wasn't trying to ruin your life. I was trying to fix mine. I was trying to fix hers. Her voice broke. But I didn't know how to stop. Every lie needed another lie. Every threat covered another fear. Judy leaned forward slightly, her eyes clear, resolute. Grief can bend people, but it cannot excuse what you did. Karen nodded, tears trailing down her neck. I know. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest. I didn't want to disappoint her, not even in memory. The courtroom felt smaller now, not hostile, not angry, but heavy with the complicated shape of remorse. For the first time, Karen did not try to defend herself. She simply sat there, her facade shattered. The truth laid bare before people she once dismissed. Judy took a deep, deliberate breath. "Ms. Clark," she said, voice steady, "remorse is not the same as responsibility. Now we determine the consequences." The moment Judy said the word consequences, the courtroom shifted again, not with tension this time, but with inevitability. Karen's tears slowed, her breathing shallow, as though she already sensed the weight that was about to be placed on her shoulders, and Ms. Nolan stood a little straighter, bracing herself for what justice, real justice, might finally feel like. Judge Judy adjusted her glasses, her posture sharpening as she transitioned from investigator to arbiter. The tone of the room changed with her, the emotional storm settling into something more precise, more final. "Ms. Nolan," she began, turning toward the plaintiff, "I want you to tell me in your own words what Ms. Clark's actions cost you." The plaintiff's throat tightened. She looked at Karen, then down at her hands, then back to Judy. "It cost me my peace," she said softly. "Every day I would come home and wonder if she'd block the road again, if I'd be trapped, if she'd yell at me from across the fence. I started parking at the bottom of the hill just to avoid being near the gate." Karen winced, a physical flinch, as if each word struck her with fresh clarity. "I stopped inviting my family over," the plaintiff continued, her voice trembling. "I didn't want my niece to hear the things she said to me. I was embarrassed. I felt small." The memory of Karen's voicemail echoed through the room again, her promise to make your life small. Hearing it now in Ms. Nolan's quiet voice carried a different kind of gravity. Judy nodded slowly. "Did you suffer financial losses?" "Yes," Ms. Nolan replied. "I had to hire a contractor twice to try to fix the access area after she dug trenches along the road. He refused to come back the third time because she threatened him too." Karen rubbed her forehead, eyes closing in renewed shame. "And emotionally?" Judy asked. Ms. Nolan hesitated. "I cried a lot. I felt unsafe in my own home. You're supposed to feel safe at home." A soft murmur rippled through the courtroom. Empathy, not outrage. Karen wiped fresh tears, silent. Judy turned to her, her tone leveling into something direct and unyielding. "Ms. Clark, do you understand the scale of the harm you caused?" Karen nodded weakly. "I do. I didn't before, but I do now." "Good," Judy replied. "Understanding is step one. Accountability is step two." The plaintiff lowered her gaze, absorbing the moment, the shift from fear to being heard. Judy picked up the torn easement photos, the voicemail transcript, the receipts, placing each one neatly in a row like the building blocks of a long-delayed truth. "These," she said, "aren't just mistakes. They are actions, choices, patterns." Karen swallowed hard. "You misused your property rights. You destroyed evidence. You lied under oath. You emotionally terrorized your neighbor, and you did it because you thought wealth gave you insulation." Karen whispered, "It didn't." "No," Judy said, "it didn't." The room tightened with anticipation, Judy's verdict not yet spoken, but forming like a storm cloud ready to break. "You caused significant emotional distress," Judy said. "You interfered with lawful access, you sabotaged her property, and you misled this court." Karen let out a faint shuddering exhale, the sound of someone realizing how high the bill for her actions had become. But Judy wasn't done. She leaned forward, voice low and clear. "And now, Ms. Clark, now the court must determine how you repair what you've broken." Judy lifted her gavel but didn't strike. Instead, she looked directly at Karen and said, "Before I issue my ruling, there's one more truth you need to hear." Judge Judy didn't speak right away. She let the room settle into a heavy, almost reverent silence, the kind that makes the truth feel closer than breath. Karen lifted her eyes slowly, as if afraid the next words might undo her completely. The gavel hovered in Judy's hand, not as a threat, but as a quiet promise. She set it down gently, folding her hands instead. "Before I rule," she said, her voice softer than it had been all day, "I want to take a moment to reflect on what brought us here." Karen exhaled shakily, one trembling hand covering her mouth. The courtroom lights hummed above them, harsh, white, unflinching, but Judy's tone carried a warmth beneath its edge, something contemplative, something unexpectedly human. People don't start out intending to become the worst version of themselves, Judy began. They take one wrong step, then another, and before they realize it, they've walked so far into the dark they can't even see where they came from. Karen blinked hard, tears blurring her vision. You were grieving, Judy continued, confused, burdened by a promise you didn't know how to keep, and instead of asking for help, you built a shield out of arrogance and intimidation. Karen nodded, shoulders trembling. But grief doesn't excuse cruelty, Judy said. Misery doesn't excuse mistreatment, and fear doesn't excuse lies. The words landed heavy, reverberating across the silent room. Karen brushed a tear from her cheek, her voice barely audible. I know. Judy turned to Ms. Nolan, who stood still as a statue, but with the softest eyes, eyes that had seen too much fear, too much humiliation, too much patience. And you, Judy said gently, have carried the weight of someone else's spiral. You lived with uncertainty, isolation, and fear, consequences you never asked for, never deserved. Ms. Nolan swallowed hard, lips pressed together to keep her composure. The camera slowly panned across the room, the bailiff, watchful, the audience, hushed. Karen, shattered, Ms. Nolan, steady in her quiet dignity. Justice, Judy said, is not just about punishment. It is about clarity, about truth, about restoring balance to people whose lives have been tilted by someone else's choices. Karen's breath hitched. I want to make it right, I really do. Judy studied her closely. And I believe, she said, that for the first time today, you mean that. Karen's face crumpled, not in defiance, but in surrender. But, Judy added, her voice tightening, wanting to make it right doesn't erase what you've done. It simply changes how you face what comes next. Karen nodded, unable to speak. Ms. Nolan let out a breath, not relief, not victory, but a release of something heavy that had lived in her chest for months. The room felt suspended, like the moment before a final chord plays. All that remains, Judy said, lifting the gavel once more, is the verdict. She raised it a fraction higher. Karen's eyes closed. Ms. Nolan's hands clasped. The courtroom leaned forward as one. The gavel hung in the air, poised for judgment. Judy met Karen's eyes with unwavering force. Here is what this court decides. Before the verdict lands, ask yourself, can someone truly change, or do they just learn to hide who they are? The gavel lowered, not striking yet, but slicing through the tension like a blade warming before it hit steel. Karen braced herself, every breath shallow, every muscle poised for impact. Ms. Nolan stood quietly, eyes steady, waiting for the justice she had fought so long to be granted. Judge Judy inhaled slowly, grounding the moment with a calm that felt almost ceremonial. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of decades of judgment, measured, precise, and unshakable. This court has carefully considered the evidence, she began, and the truth you both brought into this room. Karen lowered her gaze, hands clasped so tightly they trembled. Ms. Clark, Judy said, turning toward her, you did not simply make a mistake. You made a series of choices, each one compounding the harm done to your neighbor. You destroyed a legal document. You blocked access to her home. You threatened her, lied to her, intimidated her, and attempted to mislead this court. Each sentence struck like a steady drumbeat, not cruel, but undeniable. Karen nodded with each blow, tears spilling silently. However, Judy continued, this court also recognizes the emotional turmoil you were experiencing. Grief can distort judgment. Pressure can cloud reason, and the image you were trying so desperately to uphold was built on a foundation of promises you didn't know how to keep. Karen swallowed, eyes red and raw. But compassion, Judy added firmly, does not erase responsibility. The sentence landed with finality. Judy turned to the plaintiff. Ms. Nolan, you endured fear, humiliation, and the constant threat of losing access to your own home. You showed patience far beyond what was required of you. Ms. Nolan's chin trembled slightly, but she held Judy's gaze. This court awards you restitution for the damage done to your driveway and access road. Ms. Clark will pay the full cost of repairs, as well as reasonable compensation for emotional distress. Karen nodded immediately, relief and remorse mixing in her expression. "But that is not all," Judy said. The courtroom leaned in. "Ms. Clark, you will also provide Ms. Nolan with a written apology, one that reflects not excuses, but accountability. And the court will record that you knowingly destroyed a legal document tied to property access." Karen's breath hitched. "That's fair," she whispered. Judy held her gaze steadily. "And finally, your behavior will be forwarded to the producers of this program, and, if necessary, the appropriate local authorities should further review be warranted." That one landed hardest. Karen's face folded, not in panic but in acceptance. "I understand," she said quietly. "I really do." Judy studied her for a long moment, long enough for Karen to feel fully seen, fully known. Then she turned toward Ms. Nolan. "And I hope," Judy said gently, "this judgment gives you back the peace that was taken from you." "Ms." Nolan nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Thank you, Your Honor." Judy lifted the gavel with a steadiness that filled the room like a final breath drawn before closure. "This matter is resolved," she declared. The gavel struck, one clean, echoing note of justice delivered. Karen exhaled shakily, her posture collapsing into something smaller, no longer arrogant, no longer towering, but human. Ms. Nolan closed her eyes, letting the weight fall from her shoulders at last. The courtroom buzzed softly as people rose, but the moment stayed suspended, quiet, full, meaningful. Judge Judy gathered her papers, her voice echoing one last time in the silence that followed. "Let this be a reminder," she said. "Power means nothing without integrity, and truth always outlives the lies built to hide it." In the end, it wasn't the evidence that destroyed Karen, it was the truth she'd been running from, and in Judge Judy's courtroom, the truth always wins.